Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to speak on Bill C-57, and I will be splitting my time with the honourable member from Selkirk in Lake Eastman. Madam Speaker, with more than 1 million Canadians with Ukrainian heritage in this country, I think it's important that we show our support for Ukraine, not only in the past, but certainly with what is going on with Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, certainly now and into the future. And Ukrainian immigrants more than 100 years ago literally broke ground and planted the roots for Canada's thriving and vibrant agriculture industry in Western Canada. So the connections are deep and profound. However, Madam Speaker, when it comes to this agreement in particular, I want to emphasize the importance of due diligence and details. The Liberals have tabled once again a 600-page trade document that is now being rushed through the House of Commons with little opportunity for our stakeholders or parliamentarians to review the intricacies of this trade agreement. What chapters have been added? What new implements have been suggested? And what are the consequences of those new chapters and new policies? Again, Madam Speaker, when it comes to this Liberal government and their history with trade agreements, the devil is in the details. Now, to back up a little bit, the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement began under the Harper Conservative government and came into force in August of 2017, and eliminated tariffs on 86% of Canadian products and exports to Ukraine. However, the modernization of this agreement is important, but I want to again emphasize the fact that we want to see the details and take time to review the wording of this new update. The reason that I want to be so adamant about that, Madam Speaker, is just simply, as I said, unfortunately the Liberal government has a history of failures when it comes to negotiating or renegotiating trade agreements. And we can go back to the very early days of this Liberal government when we renegotiated NAFTA, or the Canada-US-Mexico Trade Agreement, CUSMA. And it was clear that the Liberals' goal on here was to simply get a deal done, tick a box, and get a photo op. The Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister sacrificed a number of critical Canadian industries with trade discrepancies that Canadian industries are still dealing with. And perhaps nowhere were those implications more profound than within Canadian agriculture. The CUSMA agreement impacted certainly a number of agriculture industries, including dairy, where we relinquished our ability to export a number of important dairy products like protein concentrate and skim milk powder. We also added additional access to American products into Canada. But perhaps the most glaring error, or perhaps it wasn't an error, maybe it was done on purpose, is the fact that this Liberal government relinquished Canada's trade sovereignty in signing the new CUSMA agreement. That's right. If Canada wants to sign a new trade agreement with any non-market country, we have to get the permission or approval from the United States. No G7 country has relinquished that kind of authority to a trading partner. Never has this happened, but that's exactly what happened with this Liberal agreement with CUSMA. And our trade and our manufacturers and industry are still dealing with the implications of this agreement, with higher tariffs on aluminum, softwood lumber, which still haven't been resolved years later. There are clearly some important reasons why Canadian manufacturers and Canadian industry don't trust this Liberal government when it comes to trade agreements, that they will base those agreements and those negotiations on sound economics and the importance of fair trade. It seems that historically the Liberals have been basing their trade negotiations on Liberal ideology and virtue signaling. That is not the way trade negotiations should be going. Even as recently as last year, when the Liberals implemented a Ukraine goods remission order, that Ukrainian products like chicken, for example, would be getting quota-free and tariff-free access into Canada. They signed this remission agreement with zero consultation with the stakeholders who would be impacted. Chicken Farmers of Canada, Egg Farmers of Canada, Canadian Poultry and Egg Processors of Canada, none of them knew that this remission order would be being signed. And they signed this at a time where avian flu outbreaks around the world, and certainly here in Canada, were devastating this industry. So we had these groups at Agriculture Committee letting Finance Canada know, Global Affairs, knowing about the impact of this agreement, and please do not renew this remission order when it came due last spring. The Liberal government ignored all of that stakeholder consultation at committee and renewed that remission order anyways last spring. This has put our biosecurity and our food security at risk, as, again, outbreaks of avian influenza were happening around the world and certainly around Ukraine as well. Now, again, last year we take a look at the Liberal NDP government's decision to impose a 35% tariff on fertilizer coming from Russia and Belarus. Again, zero consultation with Canadian producers, especially those farmers in Ontario and Eastern Canada that rely almost wholly on that fertilizer coming from Russia and Belarus. Now, I understand what the government was trying to do. They were trying to punish Putin for his illegal invasion of Ukraine. But Putin wasn't paying those tariffs. Canadian farmers paid more than $34 million in tariffs just to get the fertilizer into Canada to plant their crops this spring. No other G7 country, none of our allies, including the United States, put such a tariff on fertilizer because they understood the importance of their farmers being competitive and the impact that tariff would have on commodity prices, not only here at home, but around the world. And again, despite every stakeholder telling the government to lift that tariff, to ensure that we're competitive, to ensure that we have access to affordable fertilizer, the Liberals have ignored them. In fact, when we've asked the government on many occasions why they implemented this tariff when none of our G7 allies did, the answer from the government was like, well, I didn't even know we bought fertilizer from Russia and Belarus, which just shows you the frustration from our stakeholders in our industry that when it comes to the Liberals and negotiating trade agreements, that they're not consulting and they're plowing ahead with these agreements without doing their due diligence, which, as much as we support a free trade agreement with Ukraine, we want to make sure that we have the time to review the details within this agreement. And once again, most recently, the Liberal NDP government has fast-tracked the United Kingdom to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the Comprehensive Trans-Pacific CPTPP, without, again, consulting with Canadian ranchers and pork producers. They desperately wanted some major gaps within that trade agreement with the CETA and Canada to be addressed for the UK to be have ascension into the CPTPP. And the numbers are stark, Madam Speaker. Last year, I want to make sure I have the numbers right. Last year, the United Kingdom imported about 4,000 tons of beef into Canada, worth $33 million. Do you know how much beef Canada exported into the United Kingdom? Zero. Not so much as a burger or a steak. And Canada's pork industry is facing a very similar trajectory, as the United Kingdom has put in non-tariff trade barriers to block Canadian imports into the United Kingdom. Has the Liberal government stood up to defend Canadian producers? Not once. Fair trade, free trade must be fair trade, Madam Speaker. So we are asking the Liberal government to do a side letter, a bilat with UK to address this trade discrepancy. But they have yet to do that. This is a massive gap where Canadian producers are the ones who are paying the price for the Liberal government getting photo ops and ticking a box when it comes to their agenda, without thinking about the consequences to Canadian industries, manufacturers, and producers. And one thing is very clear, Madam Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, he is failing Canadian agriculture and our industries on the global stage, and our valuable industries are paying the price. The Conservative Party, we support free trade, and we are very proud of the 40 free trade agreements we signed under Prime Minister Harper. But under those agreements, they benefited Canadian industry, Canadian workers, and not at the expense of our hardworking producers. Madam Speaker, we want to clearly and carefully review this trade deal and consult Canadian stakeholders to ensure that we reach a free trade agreement with Ukraine, a free and fair trade agreement, not just ticking a box. An agreement which will preserve and enhance Canadian industries, including Canadian agriculture, and not follow the same failed policies and failed direction that this Prime Minister has become very famous for.